Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Mike Crowder, and I've been a ranger with the Jefferson National Forest for 23 years. Before that, I spent 8 years as a military police officer in the Marines. I've tracked poachers through blizzards, pulled lost hikers off cliffs, and once talked down a guy who thought the trees were sending him messages. I've seen a lot of strange things in these Virginia mountains, but I never believed in ghosts or monsters or any of that supernatural nonsense. Mountain lions, though, that's a different story. We call them painters here in Virginia, an old Appalachian term that comes from the way their screams sound like a woman crying. The experts will tell you painters went extinct east of the Mississippi over 100 years ago. Every time someone reports seeing one, Fish and Wildlife explains it was probably a bobcat or a big dog or shadows playing tricks. For 23 years, I backed them up on that. I dismissed dozens of sighting reports as wishful thinking or tall tales. Until November 1994, when I found myself tracking something that hunted like a big cat but left human footprints right alongside its paw prints. It was late November, unusually warm for that time of year. I was working out of the Mount Rogers Station, the highest peak in Virginia, about 30 miles from the nearest real town. We were in the middle of hunting season, and the forest should have been busy with orange vests and rifle shots. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. "Mike, we got another one." My dispatcher Sarah's voice crackled over my Motorola radio that Tuesday morning. "Dead livestock up at the Hendricks farm. Third incident this week." I loaded my evidence kit into my '92 Chevy Blazer and headed up the mountain road. The Hendricks place sat at the edge of the National Forest, a small cattle operation that had been there since before the land became federal property. When I pulled up, Old Man Hendricks was waiting by his barn, his hunting rifle cradled in his arms. He looked like he hadn't slept. "It's in the back pasture," he said, not bothering with greetings. "Killed 2 calves last night. Whatever did it, Mike, it ain't natural." I'd heard that kind of talk before from farmers who'd lost livestock. Usually turned out to be a black bear or coyotes, sometimes just disease. But when I walked into that pasture and saw what was left of those calves, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The kills were brutal and efficient. Deep claw marks raked across the sides, throats torn open with surgical precision. The kind of damage a big predator makes, something with real power behind it. I took out my camera and started documenting the scene, taking measurements, making notes. That's when I saw the tracks. In the soft mud near one of the carcasses, there was a perfect print of a mountain lion's paw. I'd seen enough plaster casts and photos to recognize it. 4 toes, no claw marks showing, about 4 inches across. It was definitely a painter track. But 6 feet away, heading toward the tree line, there was a human footprint. Bare feet, large, maybe size 12. And then another painter track. Then another human print, back and forth like whatever made them couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. In 23 years, I'd never seen anything like it. "Mr. Hendricks," I called out. "Did anyone walk through here barefoot? In November?" He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mike, it was 35 degrees last night." I made plaster casts of both the cat prints and the human prints, took dozens of photos, collected samples of the claw marks and bite patterns. Everything by the book, just like I'd done hundreds of times before. But this wasn't like anything I'd done before. Back at my truck, I radioed Sarah. "Call Fish and Wildlife. Tell them we might have a confirmed mountain lion in the area. Also, call the sheriff's department. We might have something else going on. Here too." On the drive back to the station, I kept looking at those prints in my mind. The way they alternated. The way they led toward the forest in a straight line, like whatever made them knew exactly where it was going. My wife Linda called on my cell just as I hit the edge of the dead zone where reception dropped out. "Mike, are you coming home for dinner?" "Probably late tonight," I said. "Got a weird situation developing." "Weird how?" I hesitated. Linda and I had been married 25 years. She knew when I was bothered by something. "I'll tell you about it later," I said. "Give the girls a kiss for me." The line went dead as I drove deeper into the mountains. Above me, the sky was turning gray. The weather service was calling for a cold front to move in, temperatures dropping 40 degrees overnight. An ice storm warning for the weekend. I didn't know it then, but that ice storm would be the least of my worries. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. on Thursday morning. I jolted awake to my radio crackling on the nightstand, Sarah's voice tight with something I'd never heard before. Fear. "Mike, we need you at Grayson Highlands. Now. There's been a death." I was dressed and out the door in 5 minutes, leaving Linda worried in the doorway. The drive up to Grayson Highlands took 40 minutes on the winding mountain roads, my emergency lights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. 2 sheriff's deputies were already there when I arrived, their cars parked at a trailhead. Deputy Tom Michaels walked over to meet me, his flashlight beam shaking slightly. "It's bad, Mike," he said. "Real bad. Hiker named David Chen, 28 years old, camped here with his girlfriend. She's the one who called it in." "Bear attack?" I asked, grabbing my evidence kit. Tom shook his head. "I don't know what the hell it was." They'd put the girlfriend, a young woman named Jessica Park, in one of the squad cars with a blanket around her shoulders. She was shaking, her eyes wide and unfocused. "She keeps saying it walked like a person," the other deputy said quietly. "Says it stood up on 2 legs before it attacked." I felt that cold feeling again, spreading through my chest. The campsite was a quarter mile up the trail. Even before we got there, I could smell blood on the air. The tent was shredded, sleeping bags torn to pieces. And in the middle of it all, what was left of David Chen. I'd seen bear attacks before, seen what happens when a black bear gets surprised or protective. This was different. This was methodical, calculated. The wounds showed massive force, claw marks that had torn through flesh and muscle down to bone, bite marks on the throat and chest that came from jaws much larger than any black bear. "Jesus Christ," Tom whispered beside me. I started documenting everything, forcing myself into professional mode. Take photos, measure wounds, look for tracks. Don't think about the fact that this used to be a person with a family waiting for him somewhere. The tracks around the campsite were everywhere, painter tracks, dozens of them, circling the tent like the animal had been pacing, stalking, planning. And then I saw them again, the human footprints. They started about 20 feet from the tent, heading in from the woods. Bare feet running stride, long gaps between prints like someone sprinting. Then they changed into cat prints mid-stride, right at the edge of the campsite. The transformation was impossible, but the evidence was right there in the dirt. "Tom," I said carefully, "I need you to see this." He came over and stared at the tracks for a long moment. "That's not possible," he said. "I know." "Mike, that's not possible." "I know." We stood there in the gray dawn light, looking at something that shouldn't exist. Aro, and us, the forest was absolutely silent. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, nothing. Like every living thing had fled the area. I interviewed Jessica Park once she was calm enough to talk. She sat in the sheriff's car, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "We heard something outside the tent," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Around midnight. David thought it was a deer. He got out to take a look, told me to stay inside." She stopped, swallowing hard. Then he started screaming. I heard growling, like a huge cat, but also breathing. Human breathing. Heavy, like someone running. David was fighting, yelling for help, and I couldn't move. I was frozen. Tears ran down her face. Then it got quiet, and I heard footsteps walking away. Not pause. Footsteps. Walking upright. And it laughed. Mike, it laughed like a person as it walked away. My hands were shaking as I wrote down her statement. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. By the time the state crime scene investigators arrived at noon, I'd made a complete documentation of the site. One of the state guys, a man named Harris, who I'd worked with before, looked at my photos and cast prints with growing confusion. Crowder, what the hell am I looking at here? I don't know, I admitted. The wounds are consistent with a large feline predator, probably a mountain lion based on the tracks. But the human prints, there are no mountain lions in Virginia, Harris interrupted. It's probably a serial killer using some kind of claw weapon to make it look like an animal attack. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that so badly. A human killer I could understand. A human killer I could track and catch. But I'd seen those transformation points where the tracks changed. I'd seen the bite radius on David Chen's body. No human jaw could open that wide. And I'd heard the tone in Jessica Park's voice when she described that laugh. That afternoon, 2 more bodies turned up. A couple hiking the Appalachian Trail segment that ran through T. Forest. Found by other hikers, torn apart like David Chen. Same massive claw wounds, same killing efficiency, same impossible tracks leading to and from the scene. 3 dead in 2 weeks. All showing evidence of big cat attack. All with those impossible human prints mixed in. I was at the 3rd crime scene when my radio started acting up. Static filled the channel, but underneath it I could hear something else. A sound that wasn't quite a voice and wasn't quite an animal. Something in between. It rose and fell in a pattern that sounded almost like words. Sarah, I called into my radio. You reading me? More static, then that sound again. Clearer this time. It sounded like breathing. Heavy, predatory breathing. And underneath it, very faint, a human voice humming. I turned the radio off with shaking hands. The sun was setting behind the mountains, temperature already dropping fast. That cold front was moving in right on schedule. I needed to get off this mountain. But as I walked back to my truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the tree line. Something that knew my name. Something that was learning. The next morning I drove into town to meet with Sheriff Douglas and the state wildlife officials. We gathered at the county sheriff's office, a cramped room that smelled like coffee and stress. 5 of us sat around a table covered with my photographs and reports. Gentlemen, said Dr. Patricia Morrison from Virginia Fish and Wildlife, I've reviewed Ranger Crowder's evidence, and while the attacks are certainly tragic, I see no concrete proof of mountain lion presence in this area. I stared at her. Dr. Morrison, I've documented dozens of paw prints, which could be fabricated, she interrupted. Hoaxes involving fake casts are not uncommon, especially during hunting season when locals want to create excitement. What about the bite patterns? I pushed. The jaw measurements match large feline predators. Or a very creative serial killer, said Agent Harris from the state police. We're treating this as a homicide. Investigation possibly involving an individual with some kind of exotic weapon or trained attack dog. Sheriff Douglas rubbed his tired eyes. Mike, I know what you're thinking. I know what those mixed tracks suggest, but we can't put shape-shifting mountain lion in an official report. I'm not saying, I started, but he held up his hand. We're closing this to new claims of supernatural activity. The official line is undetermined animal attack, possibly a transient large predator that's since moved on. We'll warn hikers, close some trails, and hope this thing goes away. They were giving up. They were going to let people keep dying because the truth was too impossible to write down. I left that meeting angry and scared, driving back into the mountains with a sick feeling in my stomach. My cell phone rang just before I hit the dead zone. Ranger Crowder? An unfamiliar voice, older with a slight accent. My name is Robert Sequoia. I'm a historian with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. I heard about the attacks in your forest, and I think I might have some information that could help you. I pulled over at a scenic overlook. I'm listening. Could we meet in person? Robert asked. What I have to show you isn't the kind of thing I can discuss over the phone. There's a diner in Marion, the Mountain View. Could you meet me there in an hour? Something in his voice told me this wasn't a crank call. I'll be there. Robert Sequoia was waiting in a back booth when I arrived. He was probably in his 60s with long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and deep-set eyes that seemed to see right through me. On the table in front of him was a worn leather portfolio. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down. "I know this situation must seem impossible to you, but I assure you, Ranger Crowder, it is very old and very real." He opened the portfolio and pulled out photocopies of old documents, handwritten journals, sketches, maps. In 1838, during the Trail of Tears, my ancestors were forcibly removed from these mountains, Robert began. Families were separated. Children were torn from their parents. Entire bloodlines were destroyed. Among those forced to march west was a family named Tsali, the Wolf People. He showed me a sketch of a petroglyph, a figure that was half human, half mountain lion. One member of the Tsali family refused to go, a young man named Waya. When the soldiers came for his family, he watched his wife and children being dragged away. In his grief and rage, he performed a forbidden ritual passed down from the old medicine people. He called on the spirit of Tlanuwa, the great hunter, to give him the power to fight back. "And it worked?" I asked quietly. "The ritual transformed him into what the Cherokee call wampus, a cursed shapeshifter. Neither fully human nor fully animal. Waya hunted the soldiers who took his family, killed them in these very mountains. But the curse wouldn't let him die. It passed through his bloodline, generation after generation, waiting." Robert pulled out a genealogy chart, names and dates going back over 150 years. 3 weeks ago, a man named James Tsali moved back to Virginia from Oklahoma. He's a direct descendant of Waya. He bought property on Mount Rogers, right on top of what used to be his family's ancestral village. The proximity to the burial grounds and the land where the curse was born, it triggered the transformation. I looked at the photographs spread across the table. 3 dead hikers, cattle torn apart, impossible tracks. So James Tsali is killing people, and he doesn't even know it? "The wampus doesn't have full control at first," Robert explained. "The transformations are involuntary, triggered by stress or anger or proximity to the sacred sites. But over time, thus, animal mind and the human mind start to merge. The intelligence grows. The hunting becomes more deliberate. How do we stop it?" Robert's expression darkened. "That's the problem. The curse can only be broken in 2 ways. Either a direct descendant of the original cursed person must willingly undergo a purification ceremony and accept the burden of their ancestors' pain, or someone in a position of authority must take responsibility for the original injustice and offer themselves as a sacrifice to break the cycle." "A position of authority," I repeated slowly, "like a law enforcement ranger." "The curse sees you as an extension of the soldiers who destroyed Waya's family," Robert said. "It will be drawn to you. It will want to transfer itself to you, or kill you trying." My coffee had gone cold. Outside the diner window, the first snowflakes of the coming ice storm were starting to fall. "Can you contact James Tsali?" I asked. "Make him understand what's happening?" "I've tried. He won't answer my calls. I think the wampus doesn't want to be stopped. It's been waiting over 150 years to be this close to home." That night, driving back to my station, my headlights caught something standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes, my truck sliding on the fresh snow. A massive mountain lion stood 20 feet in front of me. It was huge, easily 200 pounds, with a tawny coat that seemed to shimmer in the headlights. But it was the eyes that froze me in place. Golden eyes that held human intelligence, human recognition. The painter looked directly at me through the windshield. Then slowly and deliberately, it rose up on its hind legs and stood upright like a man. My hand went to my service weapon, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The creature's mouth opened, showing fangs as long as my fingers, and it spoke in a voice that was half growl, half human. "You? Where? There. Uniform." Then it dropped to all fours and vanished into the trees so fast it seemed to simply disappear. I sat there shaking for 5 full minutes before I could trust my hands enough to drive. When I finally made it home, Linda took one look at my face and sat me down at the kitchen table. "Mike, what's happening up there?" I told her everything. The attacks, the tracks, Robert's story about the curse, the thing I'd just seen standing in the road. She listened without interrupting, her hand holding mine. "You believe him," she said when I finished. "You believe this Cherokee man's story about a shapeshifter." "I saw it, Linda. I saw it stand up and talk." She was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know, but I can't let anyone else die." The phone rang. Linda answered it, her face going pale. "Mike," she whispered, holding out the phone. "It's Sarah. There's been another attack. A hunter in a tree stand. He's alive, but barely." I grabbed the phone. "Where?" "Mount Rogers, North Face. Mike, the victim, says the cat climbed straight up a smooth tree trunk to get him. 15 feet up, no branches. That's not possible." "Nothing about this is possible," I said. "I'm on my way." As I headed for the door, Linda grabbed my arm. "Mike, if this thing is coming for you, if it wants you specifically, then I need to face it before it hurts anyone else trying to get to me." The ice storm was starting in earnest now, coating everything in a thin layer of frozen death. I drove into it anyway, heading back into the mountains where something with my face in its memory was waiting. The hunter's name was Marcus Webb, and by the time I reached the hospital in Marion, he'd told his story to 3 different people who all thought he was in shock or hallucinating, but I knew better. "It looked at me," Marcus kept saying, his arm in a sling where the wampus had grabbed him. "Looked right into my soul. And it said, 'Tell Crowder I'm waiting at the old village.' It knew your name, Mike." "How did it know your name?" "Because it was hunting me now. Because I wore the same uniform as the soldiers who destroyed its family 156 years ago. Because in the creature's mind, I represented every injustice, every broken promise, every loss that could never be made right." Robert Sequoia was waiting in the hospital lobby. He stood up when he saw me, his face grim. "James Solly's property is on Mount Rogers, about 2 miles from the peak," Robert said. "But the old Cherokee village, the place where Waya performed the original curse, is further up on the north face. That's where it wants you to go." "When?" I asked. Robert checked his watch. "Tonight, midnight. There's a lunar alignment that happens once every 7 years, the same alignment that was in the sky the night Waya transformed. The curse will be at its strongest. That's when it will try to either kill you or transfer itself to you. And if I don't go, it will keep killing. Anyone it sees as connected to you, your family, your coworkers, every hiker in these mountains. It won't stop until it gets what it wants." I looked out the hospital window at the ice storm coating the world in white. "Then I guess I'm going. But I need you there, Robert. If there's any chance of doing this ceremony, breaking the curse properly, I need you to guide me through it." He nodded slowly. "I'll bring what I need for the purification ritual. But Mike, you need to understand, there's a very real chance neither of us makes it off that mountain. I've made peace with worse odds." At 10:30 p.m., Robert and I started up the mountain in my Blazer, chains on the tires to handle the ice. The road became impassable about a mile from the old village site, so we parked and continued on foot. Robert carried a traditional Cherokee medicine bag and wore ceremonial clothing under his winter coat. I had my service weapon, my backup revolver, a flashlight, and a satellite phone in case we needed rescue. Though I doubted rescue would come in time if things went wrong. The forest around us was dead silent except for the creak of ice-laden branches. No wind, no animal, just the crunch of our boots on frozen snow and the ragged sound of our breathing. "The village was called Kauahi," Robert said as we climbed. "Place of the mulberry tree. Waya's family lived here for 10 generations before they were forced out. His wife and children died on the march west. Did you know that? They died within weeks of leaving these mountains. That's why his rage was so powerful. He lost everything." We reached the ruins just before midnight. It wasn't much. Some foundation stones, a few collapsed structures barely visible under the snow and ice, but I could feel it. The weight of history, the presence of something old and angry and tired. In the center of the ruins, a fire burned. Impossible in this ice storm, but there it was, crackling cheerfully like it was summer. And standing beside the fire, naked despite the freezing temperature, was a man in his early 40s with long black hair and golden eyes. "Ranger Crowder," James Solly said in a voice that wasn't quite human. "Thank you for coming. It's been so long since anyone in uniform had the courage to face what was done here." "James," Robert called out, stepping forward. "James, you don't have to do this. We can perform the ceremony. We can break the curse. You can be free." James, or the Wampus, or whatever combination of the two he'd become, laughed. It was the same laugh Jessica Park had heard the night her boyfriend died. "Free? I am free for the first time in my life. Do you know what it's like, Robert? To feel your bones reshape, your senses expand, to hunt with the strength of 10 men. This isn't a curse. It's a gift my ancestor earned with his pain." "By killing innocent people," I said, my hand resting on my weapon. "People who had nothing to do with what happened in 1838. "Everyone has something to do with it," James roared, his voice sliding between human and animal. "Every deed dimbled. Hey, you people walk these mountains like you own them. Like the blood spilled here doesn't matter. Like my family's graves are just interesting historical sites. Well, I'm making you remember." His body started to shift, bones cracking and reforming. In seconds, the man was gone, and the 200-pound mountain lion stood in his place, muscles rippling under golden fur. Robert was already pulling items from his medicine bag. Sage, cedar, stones carved with symbols. "Mike, I need time. I need you to keep it occupied while I prepare the ceremony." The Wampus circled us, moving with fluid grace despite its massive size. Those golden eyes never left me. "Your sacrifice would be fitting," it growled in that impossible half-human voice. "Your blood on this ground. Payment for what your government did to mine." "I'm not here to pay for anything," I said, drawing my Glock. "But I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else either." The Wampus charged. I fired 3 times, center mass, the shots echoing across the frozen mountain. The creature stumbled but didn't stop, hitting me like a freight train. We went down in a tangle, its hot breath in my face, claws tearing at my coat. I shoved my backup revolver against its ribs and fired twice. It screamed, a sound that was both cat yowl and human agony, and leapt back. Behind us, Robert was chanting in Cherokee, moving around the fire in a ritual pattern. The air started to feel thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The Wampus circled again, blood matting its fur from the bullet wounds but moving like they barely hurt. Its eyes locked on Robert. "No!" I shouted, stepping between them. "You want me? Here I am. But we're doing this the right way. We're ending this curse properly, so it doesn't just pass on to someone else." For a moment, I saw something flicker in those golden eyes, something human and lost and desperately sad. "I'm tired," James Solly's voice whispered through the cat's mouth. "So tired, but I don't know how to stop." "Then let us help you stop," I said, lowering my weapon. "Let Robert finish the ceremony. Let this end." The Wampus stood there, trembling, caught between forms. I could see both man and cat trying to exist in the same space, tearing each other apart. Robert's chanting grew louder. He pulled out a knife and cut his own palm, letting blood drip onto the ancient stones. "Mike, I need you to do the same, willingly given blood from one who wears the uniform of authority. It's the only way to complete the ritual." I didn't hesitate. I took the knife and cut my palm. Let my blood mix with Robert's on the stones where Waya had first called down the curse 156 years ago. "I take responsibility," I said, the words coming from somewhere deep. "I take responsibility for what was done here, for the families torn apart, for the children who died on that march, for the pain that never healed. I acknowledge it. I witness it. And I ask for the strength to carry it forward, so you can finally rest." The wampus threw back its head and roared, a sound of rage and grief and release all mixed together. Its body convulsed, shifting rapidly between human and cat, unable to hold either form. Robert threw sage and cedar into the fire. The smoke turned colors I'd never seen before, swirling around us in impossible patterns. The temperature dropped so fast my breath froze in my lungs. And then, suddenly, it was over. James Tsali collapsed in the snow, fully human, fully naked, shivering and sobbing. The golden light faded from his eyes, leaving them brown and normal and confused. "Where?" he whispered. "Where am I?" The rescue teams found us at dawn, 3 people suffering from exposure huddled around a dead fire. They airlifted James to the hospital with severe hypothermia and malnutrition. Robert and I were treated for minor frostbite and released. In my official report, I wrote, "Following investigation, attacks attributed to transient mountain lion, animal presumably moved on. No further supernatural elements to report. Cherokee Nation performed cultural blessing on affected sites. Case closed." Sheriff Douglas read it and nodded. "Good work, Mike. Let's hope that's the end of it." But we both knew it wasn't the end of anything. James Tsali had no memory of the transformations, no memory of the people he'd killed. He was placed in a mental health facility for evaluation, his property on Mount Rogers quietly purchased by the Cherokee Nation through an anonymous donation. Robert and I stayed in touch. He taught me about the Cherokee history in our mountains, the sacred sites that needed protection, the old wounds that still hadn't healed. I started pushing for indigenous consultation on all forest management decisions. It wasn't much, but it was something. 3 months later, Robert called me late at night. "We have a situation in Tennessee," he said. "A family with Cherokee ancestry, same as James. Started having violent episodes near an old burial ground. They're showing signs." "Signs of what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Transformation. The curse didn't break, Mike. It just went quiet for a while. There are other bloodlines, other families with the weight of that history in their bones." I thought about the golden eyes in the darkness, the feeling of something watching me from the forest edge, the way animals still went quiet sometimes when I patrolled certain parts of Mount Rogers. "What do we do?" "We help them," Robert said. "We find them before it gets bad. We do the ceremony right. We take responsibility like you did, over and over, until we've healed all the old wounds." That could take the rest of my life. "Yes," Robert agreed. "It could." I told Linda about the call. She listened like she always did and then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Are you going to do it? Spend your career chasing these cases?" I thought about David Chen, who just wanted to go camping with his girlfriend, about the Hendricks calves torn apart in their pasture, about James Tsali, who never asked to carry his ancestors' curse. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am. Now I train other rangers, other law enforcement officers who've encountered things that don't fit in official reports. We have a network, quiet, unofficial, mostly dismissed as paranoid conspiracy theorists. But we know the truth. There are places in these mountains where history never dies, where old pain turns into something that hunts, where the line between human and animal gets thin and strange. And when the reports come in, livestock killed in unusual ways, tracks that don't make sense, witnesses who sound crazy but look terrified, we know what questions to ask. We know what signs to look for. Last week, I was up on Mount Rogers checking trail conditions when I saw something move in the trees. Just for a second, a flash of golden fur, watching me with 2 intelligent eyes. I stood still and spoke to the forest. "I remember," I said. "I witnessed what happened here, and I'm sorry." The watching presence faded. The birds started singing again. The forest felt lighter. It's not much, but it's something. If you're hiking in Cherokee country and you see a mountain lion that looks you in the eye like it knows you, back away slow and respectful. Don't run. Don't shoot. Just acknowledge what you're seeing and give it space. Some wild things have human hearts trapped inside, and sometimes the only way to help them is to remember why. My name is Mike Crowder. I've been a ranger for 23 years, and I've learned that the scariest things in these mountains aren't the ones that want to kill you. They're the ones that just want someone to remember they existed at all. My name is Dorothy Fairweather, but everyone calls me Dot. I've been a forest ranger in West Virginia for 14 years now, and I'm going to tell you about the worst 3 days of my life. The days I learned that some old mountain stories aren't stories at all. It was August 1972, middle of the hottest, driest summer anyone could remember. I was 39 years old and one of the first female rangers they'd ever hired in the Monongahela National Forest. Most folks thought a woman had no business fighting fires or managing timber, but I'd proven myself over and over. I had a forestry degree from WVU. I could swing a Pulaski axe better than most men, and I knew these mountains like the back of my hand. That particular August, we were on extreme fire watch. 6 weeks without rain. Everything was bone dry and ready to burn. I spent my days driving my 1970 Ford F-250 fire truck along dirt roads, checking for smoke, monitoring the weather radio, keeping my eyes open for any spark that might turn into disaster. I lived alone in a small ranger station near Elkins, going home once a week to check on my elderly mother. Never married, never had kids. The forest was my life, and honestly, I liked it that way. Out here, nobody questioned whether I belonged. The trees didn't care if I wore pants instead of a dress. My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was little. Mountain stories about bone whistles carved from human bones, used by witches and folk magic workers to call back the dead. She said her own aunt could blow one and make spirits dance like puppets. I always figured it was just superstition mixed with too much corn liquor. Mountain people love their ghost stories. I never believed any of it. Not until Dolly Sods. Dolly Sods is a strange place, even on good days. It's a high plateau over 4,000 feet up with an ecosystem you won't find anywhere else. Done. Ted trees, open meadows, rocky ground, and bogs that'll swallow you if you're not careful. The Native Americans considered it sacred ground, burial mounds scattered all over. Then the Civil War came through and tore everything up. After that, logging companies stripped it bare. The land never quite recovered. On August 23rd, I got a call on my radio around 2 in the afternoon. Lightning strike up on Dolly Sods. Possible fire. I grabbed my gear and headed out alone. We were short-staffed and it was probably nothing. Just needed someone to check it out and call for backup if necessary. The drive took 45 minutes on rough forest roads. My truck had a 500-gallon water tank in back, plus all my equipment. Axes, shovels, fire shelters, drip torches for controlled burns. The radio crackled with weather reports. Temperature, 95 degrees. Humidity, 90%. Wind, variable. Fire danger, extreme. I knew every inch of this forest, but something felt wrong as I drove up toward the plateau. The birds were gone. Completely gone. No crows, no hawks, nothing. The woods were silent except for my truck engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. When I reached the plateau, I saw the smoke. Not a lot, but enough. I parked near the old access trail and hiked in with my radio, fire weather kit, and hand tools. The air smelled like hot stone and pine needles. Sweat ran down my back. I found the fire about a quarter-mile in, burning in an open area near some old burial mounds. But as I got closer, something made me stop cold. The fire was burning in a spiral. Perfect spiral, like someone had drawn it on the ground with a compass. The flames moved outward from a center point in a slow clockwork pattern. I'd fought fires for 14 years, and I'd never seen anything like it. Fire doesn't burn in patterns. Fire spreads wherever the fuel and wind take it. I stood here, sweating, watching flames curl in that impossible spiral, and felt my stomach go cold despite the heat. The center of the spiral was right on top of the largest burial mound. The flames circled it but never touched it, like they were avoiding that specific spot on purpose. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Fairweather. I've got a situation up at Dolly Sods. Fire is exhibiting unusual behavior, requesting backup, and static." Loud, harsh static that made me wince and turn the volume down. I tried again. Base, do you copy? This is Fairweather on Dolly Sods. More static. Then, underneath it, something else. A sound like music? High-pitched, like a flute or whistle. It made my teeth ache. I switched frequencies. Same static, same weird music underneath. Great, I muttered. Lightning must have fried something in the radio system. I was on my own. Standard procedure: establish a fire break, find a water source, contain the spread. The fire wasn't huge yet, maybe 30 feet across. I could handle it. I started walking the perimeter, planning where to dig my line. That's when I saw them. Bones. Small ones. Scattered around the burial mound like someone had tossed them there. They looked old, yellowed with age. But they hadn't been there the last time I'd patrolled this area, 3 weeks ago. I was sure of that. Some of the bones had holes carved through them. Finger bones, I thought, drilled through lengthwise. Bone whistles. Just like my grandmother's stories. The wind picked up, hot and dry, and I swear I heard music again. That same high, aching sound, coming from the bones. I told myself it was just wind passing through hollow spaces. Natural, logical. But my hands were shaking as I set down my gear and pulled out my Pulaski axe to start cutting a fire break. I worked for an hour in the brutal heat, clearing brush and digging a fire break line around the fire. The spiral kept burning, moving slowly outward. Every time I thought I had it contained on one side, the flames would shift direction, always maintaining that perfect spiral shape. It didn't make sense. Wind was barely moving. Fire should have been spreading in one direction, not rotating like this. My watch said 4:15 p.m. Sun was still high and hot. I needed water, both for me and for the fire. There was a small stream about 200 yards away. I grabbed my portable pump and headed for it. The forest felt wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. The silence pressed down like something physical. No insects buzzing, no squirrels chattering. Nothing. I reached the stream and set up my pump. The water was low but running. I primed the pump, pulled the starter cord, and nothing. I tried again. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. Come on, I said, checking the fuel line, the spark plug, everything. The pump was in perfect condition. I'd serviced it myself just last week. 5 more tries. Nothing. The engine was dead. I carried water back in my canteen and a collapsible bucket, threw it on the flames. The fire hissed, but didn't go out. If anything, it seemed to burn hotter. My radio crackled. That music again, louder now. Definitely coming from the radio itself, not the bones. But it was the same sound, high and haunting, like a Native American flute. Base, if you can hear me, I've got equipment failure up here, I said into the radio. Pumps down. Fire is not responding to normal suppression. I need backup as soon as... The radio went dead. Completely dead. Not even static. I checked the battery. Full charge. Something cold ran down my spine despite the heat. I walked back to the fire. It had grown. Not a lot, but definitely bigger. The spiral was maybe 40 feet across now, still centered on that burial mound. And there were more bones. At least a dozen bone whistles arranged in a circle around the mound. I hadn't seen them before. I was absolutely certain they hadn't been there an hour ago. The wind picked up again. The whistles sang, a chorus of different notes that somehow fit together into a melody. It sounded sad and angry at the same time. It made my chest hurt to hear it. I grabbed one of the bone whistles, thinking I'd throw it away from the fire. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt something like an electric shock. The whistle was ice cold, even though it was lying next to flames. And it was playing itself. I could feel it vibrating in my hand, producing that high, aching note without any breath passing through it. I dropped it fast. Okay, I said out loud, just to hear a human voice. Okay. There's a rational explanation for this. Magnetic fields. Or gas from the bog. Swamp gas makes people see things, right? But I didn't believe it. Not really. I decided to hike back to my truck and drive out for help. The fire was beyond my ability to handle alone, especially with no working equipment. I packed up my gear and started walking. The trail was easy to follow. I'd been on it hundreds of times. Except after 10 minutes, I wasn't at my truck. I was back at the fire. That couldn't be right. I turned around, reoriented myself, started walking again. This time I counted steps, kept my eyes on landmarks. 15 minutes later, I was back at the fire. The spiral had grown again, 60 feet across now. The center was still cold, still untouched. The flames danced higher, and in the smoke I saw shapes. Human shapes, like people standing in the fire but made of smoke and heat shimmer. My throat was so dry I couldn't swallow. I tried the radio again. Dead. I tried walking out again, got turned around again. Every path led back to the fire. The sun was lower now, almost 6 o'clock. In a few hours it would be dark. I sat down on a rock, trying not to panic. I was a forest ranger. I was trained for emergencies. There had to be a logical way out of this. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, hand on my axe. An old woman was walking toward me out of the trees. She was Native American, maybe 70 years old, wearing a long skirt and carrying a walking stick. She moved steadily, despite the rough ground. "You shouldn't be up here," I called out. "There's a fire, it's not safe." She kept walking until she was about 10 feet away. Then she looked at me with eyes that were sharp and clear. "The fire is not the danger," she said. Her voice was steady. "The calling is." "Who are you?" "Mary Corn Planter, Seneca Nation. These are my people's burial grounds." She looked at the spiral of flames. "Someone has been playing the bone whistles, calling the dead home. They're angry now. They've been waiting a long time." I wanted to tell her she was crazy, that there was no such thing as calling the dead. But I'd just spent 2 hours trying to walk away from a fire that wouldn't let me leave. "The whistles," I said. Are they real? The stories?" Mary nodded slowly. "White soldiers took them during the war, the old war, 1863. They stole them from our dead and used them to torture our people, made them hear the voices of their ancestors crying out. The whistles have power. They call spirits back from the other side. But without the proper ceremonies, the spirits get trapped, confused, angry." She walked closer to the fire, not seeming afraid of it at all. "The fire is their anger," she said. "It will keep burning until the whistles are silenced, until the dead are given rest." I stood up. "How do we silence them?" "Return them to the burial mounds. Perform the proper rites." She looked at me. "But first, we have to survive what's coming. They've been called now. They're waking up. And they're hungry." The temperature dropped. I mean, it dropped fast. From 95 degrees to what felt like 50 in about 10 seconds. I could see my breath in the air. The smoke shapes in the fire were getting clearer. I could make out faces now. Dozens of faces, all staring at us. Mary pulled a bundle of sage from her bag and lit it with a match. The smoke smelled clean and sharp. "Stay close to me," she said. "And whatever you do, don't let them touch you. If they touch you, they'll remember what it was like to be alive. They'll try to take it back." That's when the screaming started. The screaming came from everywhere at once. From the smoke, from the ground, from the air itself. Not words, just rage and pain and loss that had been building for over 100 years. The smoke figures started moving. They stepped out of the flames like people walking through a door, becoming more solid with each step. I could see details now. Buckskin clothing, long hair, faces twisted in anger and grief. "Seneca warriors," Mary said quietly, "buried here after a raid. They were protecting their families when the soldiers came." One of the figures turned toward us. Its eyes were empty black holes, and when it opened its mouth, more smoke poured out. It pointed at me with a hand that looked almost real. "It knows you're not Seneca," Mary said. "It knows you're white, like the soldiers who stole the whistles." "I didn't steal anything," I said, but my voice shook. Doesn't matter. To them, you're all the same. The figure moved closer. Others followed. At least 20 of them now, surrounding us. The air was so cold I was shivering despite the fire still burning nearby. Mary held up her sage bundle and started singing. The words were Seneca. I didn't understand them, but they sounded old and powerful. The smoke figures stopped moving. They swayed like grass in wind, listening. But they didn't leave. It's not enough, Mary said. They want justice. They want their sacred objects back, and they want someone to pay for what was done. Then let's return the whistles, I said. Show me how. Mary shook her head. Not yet. There are others coming. The soldiers who stole the whistles. Their spirits are trapped here too. The whistles bind both sides. When we break the binding, it's going to get worse before it gets better. As if on cue, I heard different sounds. Gunfire, shouting in English, the clash of metal. From the opposite side of the fire, more figures emerged from the smoke. These wore Union and Confederate uniforms, tattered and burned. They carried ghost guns and ghost swords. Their faces were pale and terrified, like they'd been running from something for a very long time. The two groups of spirits saw each other. The temperature dropped even further. Frost formed on the ground. The battle, Mary said. They fought here, died here. The whistles have called them all back to fight again. The spirits charged at each other. I watched dead men fighting dead men, their weapons passing through each other but somehow still causing damage. When a spirit was struck, it would break apart into smoke, then slowly reform. The fire grew larger. The spiral pattern dissolved into chaos as the battle raged around and through the flames. The heat was incredible. I felt my skin blistering even from 30 feet away. We need to get to the burial mound, Mary said. The center. That's where we can perform the rite. But we have to go through them. That's insane. Yes. She looked at me. But it's the only way. She started walking toward the fire, singing her protective song. I followed, holding my Pulaski axe like a weapon, even though I had no idea if it would do anything against spirits. The smoke figures turned toward us. Some reached out as we passed. When their fingers brushed my arm, I felt a cold so intense it burned. I gasped and stumbled. Don't stop, Mary said. Keep moving. A Confederate soldier spirit stepped in front of me. His face was young, maybe 20. He'd been shot in the chest. He opened his mouth and I heard a voice like wind through broken glass. Help me, please. I want to go home. I can't, I whispered. He reached for me. I swung my axe. It passed right through him, but he flinched back. We made it to the burial mound, the cold center of the spiral. Up close, I could see the one whistles clearly, 13 of them, arranged in a perfect circle around the mound. We have to gather them all, Mary said. Put them back in the earth together. Then I'll sing the death song, the proper one. It will release them. I picked up the first whistle. It was cold and vibrating in my hand, playing its lonely note. The moment I touched it, I felt something rush through me, memories that weren't mine. I saw through someone else's eyes, soldiers surrounding a village, fires burning, people screaming, a warrior standing his ground to protect his family, then pain and darkness. I dropped the whistle and staggered back. The whistles remember, Mary said. They hold the pain. You have to be strong. I picked it up again, gritting my teeth against the flood of memories. I put it in my pack. 11 more to go. Each one was worse. Each one showed me deaths, both native and white. I saw warriors falling to bullets. I saw soldiers dragged into the forest by something with too many teeth. I saw families torn apart. I saw cruelty and courage and fear all mixed together. By the time I gathered the 8th whistle, I was crying. By the 10th, I was barely standing. The battle around us intensified. The spirits seemed to know what we were doing. They were trying to stop us. A warrior spirit grabbed my shoulder. His hand was solid now, ice cold and strong. He pulled me backward, away from the mound. I kicked and twisted, but his grip was like iron. "Let her go!" Mary shouted. She threw sage smoke at him. He hissed and released me. I grabbed the 11th whistle. That's when I saw him, the war chief. He rose from the burial mound itself, taller than the others, made of smoke and fire and pure rage. He wore a headdress of eagle feathers that burned with cold flames. In his hand, he carried a bone whistle carved from a human skull. He pointed at me. His mouth opened, and I heard him speak directly into my mind. You stand on sacred ground. Your people stole from us, killed us, scattered our bones. Now you will pay the debt. He blew on his skull whistle. The sound was so loud and so terrible that I fell to my knees. It felt like my bones were being pulled out of my body. I screamed, but couldn't hear my own voice over that horrible music. Mary was singing louder, trying to counter it, but she was old and getting tired. I forced myself to crawl forward. 2 more whistles. Just 2 more. The war chief walked toward me. Where his feet touched the ground, the earth froze solid. He raised his hand, and flames erupted from his palm, cold flames that burned blue and white. This is your justice, his voice said in my head. Feel what we felt. Die as we died. He touched my chest with 1 finger. I felt myself aging, my skin wrinkling, my hair going gray, my bones getting brittle. I was experiencing death, not my own, but the deaths of everyone buried in this place. Dozens of deaths, all at once. I was drowning in death. I was dying. I could feel it. My heart was slowing down. My lungs couldn't get enough air. The war chief's finger pressed against my chest like a burning coal made of ice. But through the pain and the rush of memories, I understood something. This wasn't about revenge. It was about being forgotten. The spirits didn't want to kill me. They wanted to be seen, remembered, acknowledged. I see you, I gasped. I see what happened here. The war chief paused. His black hole eyes stared down at me. Your people were protecting their families, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. The soldiers came and you fought back. You died defending what you loved. And then they stole from your graves and scattered your bones like you were nothing. The pressure on my chest eased slightly. I'm sorry, I said. And I meant it. I'm so sorry for what was done to you. The war chief tilted his head, studying me. But killing me won't fix it, I continued. It won't bring you peace. You're trapped here, fighting the same battle over and over. The whistles are holding you here. Let me finish this. Let me return them properly. For a long moment, nothing happened. The battle raged around us. The fire burned. The cold flames intoned. The war chief's hand flickered. Then he stepped back. He lowered his hand. The aging feeling stopped. I could breathe again. Mary grabbed my arm and helped me up. Finish it, she said. Now, while he's listening. I stumbled to the last 2 whistles and picked them up. The memories flooded through me again, but I held on. I put them with the others. Now what? I asked Mary. Dig, she said. Make a hole in the center of the mound. We put them back where they came from. I used my hands and a small shovel from my gear. The earth was soft, like it wanted to open up. About 2 feet down, I found more bones, a full skeleton laid out properly. A chief, Mary said, buried with honor before the soldiers came. I laid all 13 bone whistles around the skeleton, arranging them carefully. My hands were shaking. Mary knelt beside the hole and started singing. This song was different, slower, sadder, a goodbye song. The spirits stopped fighting. They turned toward us, drawn by the music. Mary sang for a long time. She sang about the lives that were lived here, the battles that were fought, the deaths that came too soon. She sang about memory and honor and rest. The war chief knelt on the other side of the hole. He laid his skull whistle down with the others. Then he looked at me again. You will remember us, his voice said in my mind. Not a question, a command. I will, I promised. He nodded once. Then he stood and turned toward the other Seneca spirits. He raised his arms and spoke in his own language, words I didn't understand but felt in my bones. The warriors stopped moving. They stood at attention, like soldiers at the end of a long battle. On the other side, the white soldiers' spirits also stopped. They looked confused, then relieved. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Mary finished her song. She took a handful of earth and sprinkled it into the hole over the whistles. "Go home," she said softly. "All of you. Your war is done. Find peace." The war chief closed his eyes. His form started to fade, becoming smoke again. Then just heat shimmer. Then nothing. The other spirits followed. The Seneca warriors dissolved like morning mist. The soldiers flickered out like candle flames. The fire went out. All at once, every flame just stopped. No embers, no smoke. Just gone. The cold vanished. The temperature jumped back up to normal summer heat so fast I felt dizzy. The sun was setting, painting the plateau orange and red. Everything was silent except for birds. Suddenly, birds were everywhere, singing like crazy, like they'd been holding their breath and finally could breathe again. I filled in the hole, covering the whistles and the old chief's bones. Mary helped me smooth the earth. We didn't talk. What was there to say? When we finished, Mary put her hand on my shoulder. "You did well," she said. "Not many would have listened." "Are they really gone?" "Yes. Finally at rest." She looked around the plateau. "But there are other places like this, other whistles scattered across these mountains, other spirits waiting to be released." "How did you get here so fast?" I asked. "You're 70 years old. This is a 20-mile hike from the nearest town." She smiled. "When the whistles play, the old paths open. I walk the path our ancestors used. It's faster than your roads." Before I could ask what that meant, she turned and walked away. I blinked, and she was just gone. Not fading like the spirits. Just gone. Like she'd stepped through a door I couldn't see. I stood alone on Dolly Sods as the sun set, surrounded by unburned grass where hours of fire should have destroyed everything. My radio crackled to life. "Fairweather, this is base. Do you copy? We've been trying to reach you for hours." I picked up the radio with shaking hands. "And this is Fairweather. I'm okay. Fire is out. What happened up there? We got your first call about unusual fire behavior, then nothing." I looked at the burial mound, at the peaceful evening settling over the plateau, at the birds circling overhead. "Lightning strike," I said. "Burned itself out. False alarm." "Copy that. We're sending a team up tomorrow to verify. Get yourself home and get some rest." "Will do." I hiked back to my truck in the gathering dark. This time the path led straight there. The official report said the Dolly Sods fire was caused by a lightning strike that burned approximately 1 acre before extinguishing itself due to unusual wind conditions and high humidity. No suppression action required. False alarm. Nobody questioned it. But when the investigation team went up the next day, they found something interesting. The area around the burial mounds had been designated for logging. After my report and some consultation with the Seneca Nation, the federal government changed the designation to Cultural Preservation Site. No logging, no development. The tribe was given co-management authority. That was 6 weeks ago. I'm back at work now, doing my regular patrols. But things are different. I carry sage in my truck, and I've been learning some of the old Seneca traditions from Mary. She visits sometimes. I still don't know how she finds me in the middle of nowhere, but she does. My mother asked why I seemed different when I visited last Sunday. I told her I'd been thinking about grandmother's stories, about bone whistles. "Oh, those old tales," she said. "Your grandmother did love her spooky stories." "Were they true?" I asked. "Could her aunt really call the dead?" Mom got quiet. Then she said, "Grandmother told me something once. She said some songs are meant to stay silent, and some debts have to be paid, even if it takes 100 years. I think about that a lot now. 2 weeks after Dolly Sods, I got a call from a ranger in Kentucky. He'd found bone whistles near an old Civil War battlefield. Strange things were happening. Fires burning in patterns, equipment failing, soldiers' ghosts walking at night. I drove down to help. Mary met me there. We did the same ceremony, returned the whistles to the earth, released the spirits. Then it happened again in Tennessee, then Virginia. Turns out there are bone whistles all over these mountains. For over 100 years, mountain folks have been finding them and keeping them as souvenirs. Old bones from old graves. They didn't know what they were. Didn't know they were keeping the dead trapped and suffering. Museums have them too. Private collections. Antique shops. Every time someone plays one, intentionally or by accident, it calls the spirits back. And the spirits are angry. They've been waiting so long to go home. I've become something between a ranger and a spiritual cleanup crew. I work with tribal elders from different nations, Seneca, Cherokee, Shawnee, to identify sacred objects and return them properly. The government doesn't know what we're really doing. They just think I've developed an interest in Native American cultural preservation. Let them think that. Last night, I was at home when I heard it. That high, aching sound, like wind through bone. I looked out my window. There was nothing there, but I could hear it, faint and far away. Another whistle being played, another calling. I grabbed my go-bag. These days it contains sage, tobacco, cornmeal for offerings, and Mary's phone number. I also carry a map with marked locations. Every spot we've cleared, every grave we've restored. There are so many left to find. Before I drove off, I called the ranger station and told them I'd be gone for a few days. They didn't ask why anymore. They'd learned I had my reasons. I drove west, following the sound only I could hear. The stars were bright overhead. The mountains were dark and silent. Somewhere out there, the dead were calling. And I learned to answer. Because Mary was right about one thing. This isn't about revenge. It's about memory. About honoring the people who came before. About making right what was wronged, even if it takes generations. The whistles are waking up all over Appalachia. Museums are reporting strange occurrences around their Native American artifact collections. Antique dealers are finding bone objects they don't remember acquiring. The earth is giving up its secrets, demanding they be set right. And I'll keep doing this work until every whistle is silenced, every spirit is released, every wrong is acknowledged. Because some songs are meant to stay silent, but some truths need to be sung. If you're reading this and you live in the mountains, listen carefully. If you hear a high, aching music on the wind, like a flute or whistle playing itself, don't investigate. Don't touch anything. Don't try to find where it's coming from. Just get out. Get out fast. And call me. My number's on file with every ranger station in the Monongahela National Forest. Ask for Dorothy Fairweather. Ask for the woman who listens to bone whistles. I'll come. I always do. Because the dead deserve to rest. And I promised I would remember. My name is William Redstone, but everyone calls me Bill. I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 16 years now. That's long enough to see just about everything these woods can throw at you. Lost hikers, bear attacks, flash floods that turn creeks into raging rivers in minutes. I've pulled 47 people out of caves, some of them barely breathing. I know every trail, every ridge, every hollow in this park. Or at least I thought I did. My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was little. Stories about things that lived in the deep places, in the hollows where the sun never quite reaches. The old Cherokee folks had names for these things. They'd leave offerings at certain caves, wouldn't go near certain valleys after dark. My grandmother swore every word was true. I never believed her. I figured it was just mountain superstition, stories to keep kids from wandering off and getting lost. Hell, I've spent half my life in those deep woods and never seen anything stranger than an albino deer. That all changed in October of 1979. It was late in the month, that weird time when the leaves turn blood red and the temperature can't decide what it wants to do. We'd had an unseasonable warm spell, then suddenly it dropped 30 degrees overnight, the kind of weather that makes the mountains feel wrong somehow. I got the call on a Tuesday morning. 3 spelunkers from the University of Tennessee had gone into the cave system at Dead Man's Hollow and hadn't come back out. They were experienced guys, not stupid kids. They'd filed a proper route plan, had all the right equipment, knew what they were doing. 72 hours missing. That's bad. Real bad. Dead Man's Hollow isn't on any of the park maps tourists see. It's way back in the backcountry, accessible only by a deer trail that's barely visible if you don't know where to look. The Cherokee used to call Pelittenviatsila, place of death. During the Civil War, deserters hid out there. Local folks won't go near it even now. I should have paid attention to that. I loaded up my truck, a '76 Ford Bronco with a winch on the front and enough emergency gear to survive a week in the wilderness. Cave rescue equipment filled the back, 200 feet of rope, carbide headlamp, emergency oxygen, first aid supplies. My radio was a Motorola HT-220, standard issue. It worked fine most places, but the hollow had iron ore deposits that played hell with signals. I'd called for backup from the Knoxville rescue team, but they had equipment problems. 48-hour delay minimum. The missing men didn't have 48 hours. I made the drive out to the trailhead alone. The dirt road got rougher the farther in I went, branches scraping the sides of my truck. When I finally parked and got out, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds. Not a single one. In 16 years of wilderness work, I'd never been in a forest with no bird sounds. There's always something. Crows, jays, woodpeckers. But here, nothing. Just the wind moving through the trees, making the leaves rustle like paper. My dog Rex, who'd been with me on hundreds of patrols, refused to get out of the truck. He was a German shepherd, trained for search and rescue, afraid of nothing. But he pressed himself against the far door, whining low in his throat. "Come on, boy," I said. "It's just trees." He wouldn't budge. I'd never seen him act like that. I should have listened to the dog. The trail into the hollow was overgrown, like nobody had used it in years. My compass started acting funny about a quarter mile in. The needle would swing wild, then settle, then swing again. I figured it was the iron ore. Had to be. The temperature dropped as I descended into the valley. My breath started fogging even though it was nearly 60 degrees back at the truck. The trees grew thicker, mostly rhododendron, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. Everything had a green, underwater quality to it. I found the cave entrance around noon. The missing spelunkers had left equipment outside, packs, extra rope, a cooler with sandwiches that the raccoons hadn't touched. Nothing takes food in these woods. Raccoons will steal anything. But they hadn't touched the cooler. The cave mouth was maybe 10 feet wide, disappearing down into darkness. I clicked on my headlamp and checked my gear one more time. The carbide flame burned steady and bright, orange, like it should be. I tied off my safety rope to a tree and started down. The first 100 feet were normal, standard limestone cave formation, water-carved passages, nothing unusual. My radio crackled with static, but that was expected. I called in my position anyway, knowing nobody could hear me. The temperature kept dropping. My thermometer read 45 degrees, but it felt colder, much colder. I could see my breath in thick clouds. That's when I found the rope. The missing spelunkers had left a guide rope, standard procedure. But about 200 feet in, I found it cut. Not frayed or broken. Cut. Clean through, like someone had taken a knife to it. But the angle was wrong. The cut was on the bottom side where rope would never rub against rock. I examined it closer with my light. The ends looked almost melted, fused together, then pulled apart. My hand was shaking a little as I coiled it up. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe they'd cut it themselves, had a reason. Maybe... That's when I saw the marks on the wall. Deep gouges in the limestone, 4 parallel lines about an inch apart. They ran along the passage for maybe 10 feet, like something with claws had dragged itself along. I put my hand up to measure. The gouges were cut 4 inches deep into solid rock. No bear could do that. No animal I knew of could carve stone like that. I followed the marks deeper into the cave. My head lit. MP started acting strange. The flame turned blue instead of orange. I'd never seen that before. I tapped it, checked the fuel. Everything was fine, but the flame stayed blue. The passage opened into a larger chamber. My light barely reached the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, echoing. And there, In the middle of the chamber, I found the first body. Or rather, I found where it shouldn't be. The body was wedged into a crack in the ceiling 50 feet above the cave floor. A young man, maybe 25, wearing climbing gear. His eyes were open, staring down at me. His face was locked in an expression of absolute terror. He was completely white. Not pale, white, like every drop of blood had been drained from his body. I stood there for a long time, just staring up at him. There was no way, no possible way a body could get up there. The walls were sheer limestone, smooth as glass. And even if somehow he'd climbed up, why? Why would he wedge himself into a crack and die there? My radio crackled. Through the static, I heard something that made my skin crawl. A voice, words I couldn't quite make out, but it sounded like it was coming from inside the cave, not from the radio. "Base, this is Redstone," I said into the handset. "I've found one of the missing persons. I need immediate backup and recovery equipment." Only static answered. Then, very faintly, I heard words. "Too late. Don't come deeper. It knows you're here." The voice sounded like the dead man above me. I spun around, shining my light into every corner of the chamber. Nothing. Just rock and shadow and the steady drip of water. "Who's there?" My voice echoed back at me. "Who's there? Who's there? Who's there?" I needed to get out. Get back up. This was beyond anything I was trained for. But when I turned back to the passage I'd entered through, I couldn't find it. My light showed 3 different tunnels, all leading away from the chamber. I'd only come in through one. I pulled out my compass. The needle spun in complete circles, never settling. "Stay calm," I told myself. Caves can be disorienting. I just needed to mark my path. Take it slow. I chose the tunnel that felt right and started walking. My boots splashed through shallow water. The blue flame of my headlamp cast strange shadows on the walls. After about 50 yards, I came to an underground stream. It flowed across the passage, maybe 3 feet wide. But something was wrong. I watched the water for a full minute before I realized what it was. The water was flowing uphill. I knelt down, put my hand in it. Real water, cold as ice. But it was definitely flowing up a slope that had to be at least 10 degrees. That's impossible. Water doesn't flow uphill. I stepped across it carefully and kept going. The passage twisted, descended, opened into another chamber. This one had a lake, black water that disappeared into the darkness. My light couldn't find the far shore. Something pale floated near the edge. I moved closer, already knowing what I would find. The second spelunker. Floating face down in the water, his body bloated. I grabbed a stick and pulled him toward the edge. When I turned him over, I saw the bite marks, puncture wounds in his neck and chest, deep holes about the size of my thumb. 6 of them, arranged in a pattern that suggested a mouth maybe a foot wide. The edges of the wounds were ragged, torn. Whatever had bitten him had fangs like railroad spikes. I should have run then, should have found any way out and never looked back. But I'd been a ranger for 16 years. I'd sworn an oath. There was still one missing person, and maybe he was alive. I followed the drag marks leading away from the lake. They were fresh, still wet. Something had pulled the body to the water recently. The marks led to a tunnel I hadn't seen before, smaller than the others. I had to crouch to fit through it. My headlamp barely lit the way. The walls pressed in close on either's side. I could hear something ahead. A sound like breathing, but too deep, too slow. Like the cave itself was breathing. The tunnel opened suddenly into a massive cavern. My light couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. It just disappeared into darkness so complete it seemed solid. In the middle of the cavern stood something that looked like a throne. A natural formation. A massive stalactite that had somehow formed into the shape of a chair. It had to be 20 feet tall, and around it, arranged in a circle, were bodies. Dozens of them, maybe more. Some were recent, still wearing modern clothes. Others were older. I saw Confederate uniforms, rotting buckskin, even older things I couldn't identify. Some were just bones. They were all facing the throne. That's when the voice spoke. Not from my radio this time. From everywhere at once, like the cave itself was talking. "Welcome, William Redstone." It knew my name. Third-generation Appalachian. Coal miner's son, widower, father of one. It knew everything about me. I ran. Pure instinct. I didn't think, didn't plan. I just turned and ran back through the narrow tunnel, my shoulders scraping the walls. Behind me, I heard laughter, deep grinding, like stones rubbing together. The tunnel seemed longer than before. My headlamp flickered, throwing wild shadows. I burst out into the lake chamber and kept going, splashing through shallow water, slipping on wet rocks. I found a different passage and took it. The voice followed me. "You cannot leave, Ranger. This hollow is mine. Every tunnel, every chamber. You're already lost." I ignored it, kept moving. My lungs burned. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. I came to a junction and stopped. 5 passages branched off in different directions. I didn't remember this. I'd been mapping caves for 16 years. I always remembered the layout. But nothing looked familiar. I pulled out my notebook, tried to sketch what I'd seen. The pencil shook in my hand. I couldn't make sense of it. The chambers and passages didn't connect properly. It was like the cave was rearranging itself. That's impossible. Caves don't change. Are you sure about that? I spun around. Standing at the entrance to one of the passages was Joseph Swimmer. Joseph was a Cherokee guide, someone I'd worked with for years protecting cultural sites in the park. He was a good man, knew these mountains better than anyone. "Joseph," I called out. "Thank God. How did you—" "I came looking for you," he said. His voice sounded wrong, flat. "When you didn't report in. We should go deeper. The third man might still be alive." Something in the way he said it made me pause. Joseph would never suggest going deeper into a dangerous cave without proper backup. "What's my daughter's name?" I asked. Joseph smiled. It was too wide, too many teeth. "I don't know, William. You never told me." The thing that looked like Joseph walked toward me. Its movements were jerky, puppet-like. The face was right, but everything else was wrong. I backed away, fumbled for my radio. "That won't work here," not Joseph said. "Nothing works here. This is the Hollow King's domain." "Where's the real Joseph?" "The Cherokee?" The smile got wider. "He came into the hollow last night. Very brave, very foolish. He brought sage and tobacco, said prayers in the old language. Did you know he volunteered to be caught? To learn my weaknesses." It gestured behind me. I turned slowly. Joseph Swimmer lay crumpled against the cave wall. His clothes were torn, his equipment scattered. But there was no body inside the clothes. Just empty fabric and gear, like he'd vanished from inside his own skin. "He learned there are no weaknesses," the voice said. It didn't come from not Joseph anymore. It came from everywhere. Only hunger, only feeding, only the throne. Not Joseph collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The clothing fell empty to the ground. I ran again, took a passage at random. My mind was screaming too. This couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. People don't vanish from their clothes. Caves don't change layout. Voices don't come from stone. But my grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Old stories. Old warnings. The Hollow King. The thing that feeds in darkness. I burst into another chamber and stopped dead. The walls were covered in paintings. Not modern graffiti, ancient paintings done in red and black pigment. They showed figures surrounding a throne, showed something rising from the throne, showed people being consumed. At the bottom of one painting was a date, 1838, the year of the Trail of Tears, the year the Cherokee were forced from these mountains. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, not running. Whatever was following me didn't need to run. I found another passage and kept moving. My watch said I'd been underground for 3 hours. It felt like days. The passage sloped downward, the ceiling getting lower. I had to crawl. My headlamp was dimming. The blue flame was almost out. I emerged into a chamber I'd seen before. The throne room. No. I'd gone in a different direction. I'd been careful. But here it was. The massive stalactite throne, the circle of bodies, the darkness pressing in from all sides. "You cannot leave," the voice said. "Every path leads here. This is where you belong. This is where you'll join the others." I shone my dying light around the chamber. The bodies were arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward. New bodies, old bodies, ancient bones, all watching the throne. Something moved in the darkness beyond my light. Something huge. "Show yourself," I shouted. My voice cracked with fear. "As you wish." The darkness pulled away from the throne like a curtain opening, and I saw it. The Hollow King. It was shaped like a man, if a man was 12 feet tall and carved from living shadow and stone. Its body seemed to shift and flow, solid one moment and smoke the next. Red eyes burned in a face that was almost human, but not quite. Too angular, too ancient. When it moved, I heard the grinding of stones, the drip of water, the echo of centuries. It sat on the throne of stone, one massive hand resting on the armrest. The hand had too many fingers. Each one ended in a claw that could carve limestone. "Do you know what I am, Ranger?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My legs had stopped working. I was Cherokee once, a shaman. When the soldiers came in 1838, when they forced my people from these mountains, I refused to leave. I chose to stay. I bound myself to these caves, to this hollow. I became the guardian of the burial grounds. It stood. The movement made my headlamp flicker and die. Only its red eyes provided light now. But guardianship requires power, and power requires sustenance. It moved closer. I could smell it now. Damp earth, old blood, centuries of decay. I have fed here for 141 years. Cherokee warriors who tried to reclaim the land. Confederate deserters who hid in my caves. Settlers, hikers, spelunkers. All of them sustain me. All of them join my court. It reached out one massive hand. The fingers were as long as my forearm. "You will too." The Hollow King's hand touched my chest. Cold. So cold it burned. I felt something inside me start to drain, like water flowing out through a crack. My vision blurred. My knees buckled. I saw my reflection in a pool of water. My hair was turning white. Lines appeared on my face, deep and sudden. I was aging. Years, decades, stolen in seconds. The king leaned close. Its breath smelled like cave air and death. "Your fear tastes like your wife's," it whispered. "She called for you when she died. Did you know that? Cancer takes so long, so much suffering. She screamed your name at the end." Rage exploded through the fear. How dare it? How dare it speak about Sarah? My hand found the sage bundle on my belt. Joseph's sage. I'd picked it up without thinking when I found his empty clothes. I pulled it out, but thumbed my lighter. The flame caught. The king recoiled. White smoke filled the chamber. The sage burned with a smell that was clean and sharp, cutting through the stench of decay. The king's hand pulled away from my chest. "Tricks," it hissed. "Cherokee tricks. They don't work anymore." But it backed toward the throne. I stood on shaking legs. My head spun from the life drain, but rage kept me upright. I held the burning sage out like a weapon. Words came to my mouth. Old words. Cherokee words my grandmother had taught me when I was 5 years old. A prayer I'd forgotten I knew. Envy Woti. Ulogilv. Galikwogi. Protection. Honor. Strength. The king shrieked. The sound made stalactites fall from the ceiling, crashing around me. "Those words mean nothing," it screamed. "This is my domain. Mine." but it kept backing away. I advanced, still reciting the prayer. The sage smoke swirled around me like armor. My headlamp suddenly flared back to life, orange flame bright and steady. "You were Cherokee," I said. My voice was steady now, strong. "You were supposed to protect. Instead, you fed on your own people, on everyone who came here. You betrayed everything you were supposed to be." "I am the guardian." The walls shook. "This is sacred ground. They disturbed the graves. They had to pay." "No." I moved closer to the throne. "You're just hungry. That's all you are now. Just endless hunger wearing the skin of something holy." The king lunged at me. I dove aside. Its claws raked the stone where I'd been standing, carving foot-deep gouges. I rolled, came up running. I could see passages now, lit by my headlamp. The cave layout made sense again, like the king's power was weakening. The sage smoke had broken something in its control. I heard water. Underground stream. The one that flowed uphill. Joseph's voice echoed in my memory. "The spirits cannot cross running water." I ran forward for the sound of water. Behind me, the king came. I could hear it moving through the stone itself, phasing in and out of the walls. Getting closer. The stream appeared ahead, wider than before, rushing faster. I didn't hesitate. I jumped. The water was ice cold. The current grabbed me, pulled me down. My headlamp went out. Total darkness. I couldn't tell which way was up. I felt the king's hand brush my leg. Even through the water, the cold burned. Then another hand grabbed my wrist. Human-sized. Warm. Joseph Swimmer pulled me to the surface. We broke through together, gasping. He was solid, real, alive. "Now!" he shouted. He had sage, too, a whole bundle bigger than mine. It burned with white flames. Together, we threw the burning sage at the hollow king. The creature stood on the bank, red eyes blazing with rage and hunger. The sage smoke hit it like a physical blow. It screamed, a sound that shook the entire cave system. "You cannot destroy me," it howled. "I am eternal. I am—" Joseph spoke in Cherokee. Old words, powerful words, binding words. The king's form started to fracture. Stone and shadow separated. The red eyes dimmed. "You violated the sacred trust," Joseph said. "You killed in anger, not protection. You fed on fear, not justice. The ancestors reject you." The king reached for us one last time. Joseph grabbed its arm and pulled. They both went into the water. The current took them instantly. I heard Joseph say one more word in Cherokee, a word that meant sacrifice. And then they were gone, swept away into the underground river. The cave system began to collapse. I ran. Ceiling coming down, walls cracking. I followed the water flow, knowing it had to lead out eventually. Rocks fell around me. Water rose to my knees, my waist. A light ahead, daylight. I pushed through a narrow opening and fell out into cold morning air. I was at the base of a waterfall, outside the hollow. The sunrise was breaking over the mountains, painting everything gold and red. Behind me, the cave entrance collapsed with a rumble like thunder. Dust billowed out. Then silence. I lay on the rocks, coughing water, shaking with cold and shock. My hair was white. I could see it falling across my eyes. My hands looked like an old man's hands. In the distance, I heard a helicopter. The backup team, finally arriving. I closed my eyes and let the sunlight warm my face. They found me 3 hours later. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, malnutrition. My hair had gone completely white, even though I was only 41 years old. The doctors couldn't explain it. Stress, they said. Trauma. I'd been missing for 72 hours, according to their clocks. According to my experience, I'd been underground for 5 days. They recovered 2 bodies from the cave system before it became too unstable. The third spelunker was never found. Neither was Joseph Swimmer. The official report said, death by cave-in and exposure. The Park Service declared Dead Man's Hollow geologically unstable and restricted all access. They put up signs, posted warnings, even stationed a ranger there for a few months. Nobody mentioned the claw marks. Nobody mentioned the bodies arranged around the throne. They sealed all that information, buried it in paperwork. But I noticed something. A week after the incident, Cherokee elders performed a ceremony at the hollow entrance. They didn't ask permission. They just came, burned tobacco and sage, sang songs in the old language. When they left, they nodded to me. A message. We know. We remember. We're keeping watch. I requested transfer to visitor center duties. Couldn't do backcountry patrols anymore. Couldn't go underground. Even walking into a dark room made my hands shake. I carried sage in my pocket every day. Got a Cherokee protection symbol tattooed on my chest, right over my heart. My daughter noticed the changes. She was 15 then, living with my sister in Gatlinburg. She asked about my white hair, about why I couldn't hug her as tight as before. I told her I'd had an accident, cave-in, lucky to be alive. She believed me for a while. Years passed. I kept working at the park, giving tours, answering questions about wildlife and hiking trails. Normal stuff, safe stuff. But I monitored the reports, missing persons in the Smoky Mountains. There are always a few every year. People who wander off trails, get lost, sometimes are never found. Most are just accidents. People underestimate the wilderness. But some go missing near Dead Man's Hollow. Not many. One every 2 or 3 years. Just enough to notice if you're paying attention. The Park Service doesn't connect them. Why would they? The hollow's been sealed for years. But I know better. Late at night, when everything's quiet, I sometimes hear a voice. It comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. It speaks my name. It knows things about me, personal things, private things, things only the Hollow King would know. You escaped me once, William Redstone, it whispers, but you cannot escape forever. This is my domain, these are my mountains, and I am patient, so very patient. I tell myself it's just PTSD, trauma playing tricks on my mind. But then I'll see a shadow move wrong in my peripheral vision, or I'll feel cold that has nothing to do with weather, or I'll find claw marks on trees near my house, 4 parallel gouges carved deep in the bark. The sage helps. The protection tattoo helps. But I know it's not over. Can't ever be over. Last month, my daughter told me she's studying to become a park ranger. She's 23 now, smart and capable and stubborn. She wants to follow in her father's footsteps, she says. Work in the backcountry, real wilderness work. I tried to talk her out of it. Suggested she work at a national park out west, somewhere far from the Smokies, somewhere safe. She laughed, said she'd grown up in these mountains, said they were in her blood. That's what worries me. Because last week, I got a call from her. She was excited, talking fast. She'd been accepted to the ranger training program. They would too, assigning her to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She'd be working backcountry patrol, starting in October. I said congratulations, told her I was proud, hung up the phone. Then I sat in my kitchen and listened to the silence. And in that silence, very faintly, I heard laughter, deep, grinding, ancient laughter, and a voice that whispered, "She has your eyes, William. Your eyes, your blood, your debt." I'm writing this down because someone needs to know. If you're reading this, if you ever find yourself in the Smoky Mountains, listen carefully. Stay on the marked trails. Don't follow deer paths into the deep hollows. If you find a place where the birds don't sing and your compass spins and the air feels too cold for the season, turn around. Walk away. Don't look back. Some places aren't meant for people. Some places have their own rules, their own hunger. And once they know your name, they never forget. My daughter starts her job in 3 weeks. I've got sage, blessed tobacco, Cherokee prayers written down phonetically since I can't remember all the words anymore. I've contacted the Cherokee elders, asked for their protection. They told me they'll do what they can. But they also told me something else. They told me the Hollow King was bound once before, long ago, but bindings can break, seals can fail, and hatred, anger, hunger, those things don't die. They just wait. They wait in the darkness. They wait in the hollow places. They wait for the next fool who walks into their domain. I look at my white hair in the mirror every morning, a reminder, a warning. Some of us escape the darkness, but we never really leave it behind. It follows us, it watches, it waits, and sooner or later, it calls us back home. If you're ever hiking in the Great Smokies and you hear your name whispered from a cave entrance, if you feel cold air flowing from a hollow where no wind should, if you see claw marks carved deep in limestone, run. And whatever you do, don't listen to the voice that sounds like someone you love. It's not them. It's never them. It's only hunger, wearing a familiar face. My name is Rebecca Millbrook, but everyone calls me Becky. I've been a ranger here in Pisgah National Forest for 11 years now, and I've led more camping trips with kids than I can count. 203 to be exact. I keep a log. Before this job, I taught 5th grade in Asheville, but after my fiancée died in Vietnam, I couldn't stand being in a classroom anymore. Too many walls, too many memories. Out here in the mountains, I could breathe again. I grew up in these woods. My grandfather was a mountain guide, and he taught me to track deer before I could read properly. My best friend growing up was a Cherokee girl named Mary Owl, and her grandmother used to tell us stories that made our skin prickle. Stories about the moon-eyed people, pale beings who lived underground before the Cherokee came to these mountains. People who couldn't see in daylight, who had huge eyes like owls, and who stole children sometimes. I never believed those stories. They were just myths, I thought. Ways to explain old bones and strange ruins people found in caves. I was wrong. September of 1967 changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. It was supposed to be a simple overnight camping trip. 3 nights, 4 days, teaching 12 kids from Asheville about nature and Cherokee culture. The kids were ages 8 to 14, good kids, excited to be out of school for a few days. We set up camp near Looking Glass Rock, about 12 miles from Brevard, in a spot I'd used dozens of times before. The weather was strange from the start. Unseasonably cold for September, with thick fog that rolled in every morning and didn't burn off until noon. The kids didn't mind. They thought the mist made everything look magical and mysterious. I remember Sarah, a bright 10-year-old with glasses, saying the fog made her feel like we'd traveled back in time. She had no idea how right she was. And on the 3rd night, everything changed. I did my usual bedtime routine, checked all the tents, made sure everyone had their flashlights, reminded them about the buddy system if they needed to use the latrine. The moon was barely a sliver that night, just a thin curve in the sky. The Cherokee call it the dying moon. I should have known better than to camp during a new moon. Mary's grandmother had always warned us about that. I woke up at dawn to a sound I'll never forget. Complete and total silence. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees. Nothing. In 11 years of camping, I'd never heard the forest go that quiet. It felt wrong, like the whole world was holding its breath. That's when little Tommy Chen came running to my tent, his face white as paper. "Miss Becky," he whispered, "Sarah and Michael are gone." I pulled on my boots and grabbed my flashlight, my heart already racing. Stay calm, I told myself. Kids wander off sometimes. They probably just went to the bathroom together. But when I checked their tent, everything was wrong. The tent zipper was closed from the inside. Both sleeping bags were still warm, like the kids had just gotten out of them seconds ago. Their shoes were still lined up neatly by the door. Their backpacks hadn't been touched. But Sarah and Michael were gone. "Did anyone hear anything?" I asked the other kids in the tent. There were 4 of them total, sleeping practically on top of each other in that small space. They all shook their heads. Nobody had heard a sound. Nobody had felt the other kids move. They'd just vanished. I started the emergency procedures I'd been trained for. First, a complete head count of all the other kids. Everyone else was present. Second, a perimeter search around the camp. I took Tommy, the oldest boy at 14, and we walked in widening circles, blowing our whistles, calling Sarah and Michael's names. No thing. The fog was thick that morning, thicker than I'd ever seen it. It seemed to form in perfect circles around our camp, like rings in a pond. My flashlight barely cut through it. "Miss Becky," Tommy said quietly, "my compass is broken." I checked mine. He was right. Both compasses were pointing toward Looking Glass Rock instead of north. That shouldn't be possible. "It's probably just the granite deposits," I said, trying to sound confident. "Lots of metal in these mountains." But I didn't believe it. I sent Tommy to the ranger station with an emergency message. It was a 3-hour hike, but he was responsible and knew the trail well. The rest of us would search until help arrived. Except Tommy never made it to the station. He came back 4 hours later, confused and upset, saying he'd walked and walked, but the trail kept turning back on itself. He'd never left the woods. That's when I started to feel real fear. By noon, something even stranger happened. I was searching near the edge of camp when I saw them, Sarah and Michael, standing at the tree line about 50 yards away. They were perfectly still, just staring at me. "Sarah! Michael!" I ran toward them, relief flooding through me. But when I got close, I stopped cold. They looked different. Their skin seemed paler, almost translucent in the thin sunlight, and their eyes looked bigger somehow, taking up more of their faces than they should. "Are you two okay? Where have you been?" I was breathless, almost crying. Sarah smiled at me, but it wasn't her normal smile. It was too calm, too knowing for a 10-year-old. Then she spoke, but not in English. She spoke in Cherokee, words I'd heard Mary's grandmother use in ceremonies. Ancient Cherokee, the dead language nobody speaks anymore. "Tsuna delaquasti, anilv dodi ayehli," Sarah said calmly. "We visited the pale children underground." Michael nodded, speaking in that same ancient tongue. "Wuyalizv unole galosdi." They showed us the old cities. Neither of these kids had known a word of Cherokee 3 days ago. I grabbed their hands. They were ice cold, and brought them back to camp. I wrapped them in blankets, gave them hot chocolate from my thermos, checked them for injuries. Nothing. They were perfectly fine physically, but they wouldn't stop speaking Cherokee, and they kept drawing pictures in the dirt with sticks. Pictures of tunnels, pictures of underground chambers, pictures of pale children with huge dark eyes. "Sarah," I said carefully, "can you understand me?" She looked at me and smiled. "Of course, Miss Becky, but the old words are easier now. The pale children taught us." "What pale children?" "The ones who live under the mountain. They've been there for so long, Miss Becky, since before the Cherokee came. They're lonely." The other kids were gathering around now, listening. Some of them were scared. Some of them looked curious. "They want to play with us," Michael added. "They want us to stay with them." That's when I noticed the toys. Scattered around our camp, placed carefully near each tent, were small wooden dolls. They were carved in old Cherokee style, the kind you see in museums. But they looked ancient, like they'd been buried for centuries. The wood was dark and smooth, worn by countless hands. None of these dolls had been there the night before, and none of them belonged to any of my campers. I should have packed everyone up right then and hiked out, even if we had to walk all night. But I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe Sarah and Michael had found an old Cherokee site. Maybe they'd been influenced by the stories Mary had told around the campfire. Maybe the dolls were from a previous camping group. I kept lying to myself because the truth was too impossible to accept. That afternoon, Mary Owl showed up at our camp. I hadn't sent for her. I hadn't sent any message. The ranger station was unreachable, remember? But there she was, walking out of the forest, with a bag of supplies, sage, cedar, traditional herbs I didn't recognize. "How did you know to come?" I asked. "I felt it," she said simply. "The old agreement is starting again." "What old agreement?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she listened to Sarah and Michael speaking their strange Cherokee. Her face went pale. "That's my grandmother's grandmother's tongue," Mary whispered. "Dead for 200 years. How do they know it?" "Mary, what's happening here?" She pulled me aside, away from the kids. "Those stories my grandmother told us, about the moon-eyed people? They're real, Becky. They've always been real. And this place, this exact spot, is where the exchanges used to happen. Exchanges? Children. Once every few generations during the new moon, the moon-eyed people would come up from their caves. They'd take some of our children, and we'd take some of theirs. It was part of a peace treaty from long ago, before anyone can remember. A way to keep both peoples alive, to share knowledge and blood. I stared at her. That's insane. Look around you, Becky. Look at what's happening. Is any of this normal? That night, I saw them for the first time. The pale children. They came at twilight when the sun was just setting, but darkness hadn't fully fallen. I was doing a perimeter check when I saw them standing at the edge of the forest. 6 or 7 children, all about the same height as my campers. But their skin was white as birch bark, their hair so blonde it looked silver, and their eyes were enormous, dark and deep like pools of night water. They didn't blink. They didn't speak out loud, but I heard their voices in my head, clear as day. Come play with us. Come see our home. We're so lonely. I felt a pull toward them, like invisible strings tugging at my chest. I actually took 3 steps forward before I caught myself. No, I said out loud. Leave us alone. The pale children tilted their heads, all at the same time, like birds. But it's the old time, the exchange time. We've been waiting. Then they faded. Not walked away, faded, like fog burning off in sunlight. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. I ran back to camp and found 3 more kids missing. Lisa, David, and Emma, all gone from their tents while I'd been gone for less than 10 minutes. The other kids hadn't seen them leave, hadn't heard anything. They'd just vanished. I gathered all the remaining campers together in the center of camp, 9 kids left out of 12. Some of them were crying, some were excited, talking about the beautiful, pale children they'd seen in their dreams. Tommy looked at me with frightened eyes. Miss Becky, what's happening? I don't know, I admitted. But we're staying together from now on. Nobody goes anywhere alone. But it didn't matter. At midnight, while I was staring right at them, watching them carefully, 3 more kids simply faded from view. 1 second they were sitting by the fire, roasting marshmallows. The next second they were transparent, like ghosts. Then they were gone. I screamed. I lunged forward, tried to grab them, but my hands passed through empty air. Mary was chanting in Cherokee, burning sage and cedar, trying to create some kind of protective barrier. But it wasn't working. Only 6 kids left now. 6 out of 12. And Looking Glass Rock, that massive granite dome that had been a mile away when we'd set up camp, was now close enough that I could see details on its face. It was moving toward us, slowly, impossibly, moving closer every hour. They're bringing their mountain to us, Mary said quietly, because we won't go to them. That's when the pale children came into our camp directly, no longer hiding at the forest edge. There were dozens of them now, surrounding us in a circle. They looked so much like regular kids. They wore simple clothes. They had curious expressions. They smiled and waved. But their skin glowed faintly in the darkness, and their eyes were all pupil, no white at all. One of them, a girl who looked about 12, spoke out loud this time. Her voice was high and musical, but with strange harmonics, like multiple people, speaking at once. Please don't be afraid. We mean no harm. We only want friends. Give me back my campers, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They're not gone. They're visiting our homes. They're meeting our families. We've been so alone, you see. So alone for so long. I don't care. They're children. They belong with their families. The pale girl looked sad. We're children too. Don't we deserve families? And that's when I understood. These weren't monsters. They weren't evil spirits or demons. They were just people. A different kind of people, yes. People who lived in darkness and had adapted to it over countless generations. But people nonetheless. People who were dying out, alone in their caves with no new blood and no future. People who were desperate. The pale girl walked closer. Up close, I could see she was beautiful in a strange, otherworldly way. Her features were more delicate than human, her movements more graceful. She looked young and ancient at the same time. "My name is Lunara," she said. "I'm what you would call a moon-eyed child. My people have lived under these mountains for thousands of years. We were here before the Cherokee, before the people before the Cherokee. We've watched your kind change and grow and spread, while we've only diminished. Where are my campers? Underground, in our cities. They're safe, I promise. They're learning our ways, meeting our elders, seeing our histories carved in stone." She paused. "But if they stay too long, they'll change. Their eyes will grow to see in darkness. Their skin will pale to avoid the sun's pain. They'll become like us." "How long?" My throat was tight. 3 days and 3 nights. After that, the change is permanent." I looked at Mary. She nodded grimly. "It's true. The old stories say 3 days. That's why the exchanges always happen during the new moon. 3 nights of darkness." "It's been 2 nights already," I whispered. Lunara smiled sadly. "Yes. Tomorrow night at moonrise, the choice will be final. They'll either return to your world or they'll stay in ours forever. They're children. They can't make that choice." "Can't they?" Lunara's huge eyes seemed to look right through me. "Some of your children are unhappy in your world, Becky Millbrook. Some are lonely, some are hurt, some don't fit in. In our world, they would be treasured, loved, taught ancient wisdom, given purpose." She wasn't wrong, and I hated that. I knew Sarah's parents were getting divorced. Michael's father drank too much. Emma was being bullied at school. These weren't happy kids going on a camping trip. They were troubled kids hoping to escape for a while. "It's still not right," I said. "You can't just take them." "We're not taking them. We're offering them a choice. The same choice that was offered for thousands of years, until your people forgot the old agreements." "Then let me see them. Let me talk to them." Lunara considered this. Then she nodded. "Come. But only you. Your friend Mary must stay and protect the others." Mary grabbed my arm. "Becky, no. If you go down there, I have to." I looked at the 6 kids remaining in camp, including Tommy, who was trying so hard to be brave. "I have to try." Lunara led me to Looking Glass Rock. Up close, I could see it wasn't natural granite anymore. Or maybe it never had been. There were carvings on it, worn smooth by time. Symbols I didn't recognize. And there was an opening, a crack in the rock that shouldn't exist. "The entrance shifts," Lunara explained. "It's never in the same place twice. That's how we've stayed hidden." We went inside. The cave was nothing like what I expected. Yes, there were tunnels and chambers, but they were carved and shaped, with bioluminescent moss providing soft, blue-green light. There were carvings everywhere, histories, stories, beautiful art depicting a civilization that had thrived underground for millennia. And there were people. Pale, graceful, beautiful people of all ages, living in a city that existed in the bones of the mountain. They stared at me as we passed, not hostile, just curious. Some smiled, some looked sad. Many looked old beyond years, their eyes holding centuries of loneliness. Lunara brought me to a large chamber where my 6 missing campers sat with pale children their own age. They were laughing, playing games with glowing stones, listening to stories told in that ancient Cherokee tongue. They looked happy. "Sarah," I called. "Michael, Lisa, David, Emma, Jacob. It's time to come back now." They looked at me, and I saw the conflict in their eyes. Part of them knew me, remembered me. Part of them was already changing, already seeing this underground world as home. "Miss Becky," Sarah said softly, "did you know there are stars underground? Real stars, from rocks that fell from the sky millions of years ago. They're beautiful." "I'm sure they are. But your parents miss you. Your families want you home." "Do they?" Emma asked quietly. "Really?" That broke my heart. An old pale man approached. He must have been their leader. His eyes were filmed with age, his skin translucent enough that I could see veins beneath. When he spoke, his voice echoed with power and sadness. "We do not wish to harm your young ones, Becky Millbrook. We wish only to survive. Our people number less than 300 now. We've lived too long in isolation. We need new blood, new ideas, new hope. The old agreements allowed both our peoples to thrive. When your ancestors forgot them, we began to die. So you're stealing children to save yourselves? We're offering sanctuary to children who need it." His gaze was piercing. "Not all children wish to return to your world. Some have found more love in 3 days with us than they knew in years above." I wanted to argue, but looking at my campers' faces, I couldn't. That's when inspiration struck, or may be it was Mary's grandmother's spirit whispering to me. "What if we renewed the agreement?" I said. "Not stealing, not tricks, but a real agreement. I work with troubled kids from broken homes. What if I brought volunteers? Kids who genuinely wanted a new life, who would benefit from what you could offer. And in exchange, you teach me your ways, your knowledge. We could create a real cultural exchange." The elder stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, a sad, hopeful smile. "You would do this, knowing what we are?" "I would do this knowing your people. Different people, yes, but people who deserve to survive." He looked at Lunara. She nodded. "Very well. We accept this new agreement. Your children will return with you tonight, memories intact but transformed by what they've seen. And you, Becky Millbrook, will become our liaison to the surface world. When you find children who would benefit from our way of life, children who choose freely, you will bring them during the new moon, and we will teach them our ancient ways." "They can still visit the surface?" I asked. "During dark times, yes. We're not jailers. Those who join us join freely, and remain free." We emerged from the cave just before dawn. All 12 of my campers were with me, healthy and whole. They remembered everything: the underground cities, the pale children, the ancient knowledge. But Mary had worked her magic too. She'd woven a gentle story into their memories, so when they told their parents about their adventure, it would sound like an exciting cave exploration, not a supernatural encounter. The hike back was quiet. The kids were tired but peaceful. Tommy walked beside me. "Miss Becky," he said quietly, "will we really go back there someday?" "Maybe, if you want to, when you're older and can make that choice for yourself." He nodded. "I think I'd like that. They were kind. They were a little different, but kind." When we got back to civilization, the parents were waiting. There had been no missing persons reports. Time had moved strangely during our trip. What felt like 3 days to us had been exactly 3 days in the outside world, no more, no less. The parents were just happy to pick up their muddy, tired, excited children. The medical exams showed nothing unusual. Well, almost nothing. Every single child now had exceptional night vision, and they all showed unusual artistic ability. They could draw things they'd seen with perfect detail. The doctors called it a quirk, a coincidence. I knew better. Mary and I became the keepers of the new agreement. Once a month during the new moon, we'd hike to Looking Glass Rock. Sometimes the pale children would come to the surface to play in the darkness, to remember what stars looked like from above. Sometimes troubled kids from my youth programs, kids with nowhere else to go, kids who didn't fit in the surface world, would make the choice to go below. Not many, maybe 1 or 2 a year, but always freely, always informed, always welcomed. The moon-eyed people began to grow again, not just in numbers, but in hope. I never married, never had children of my own, but I became a mother to both worlds, a bridge between light and darkness. I learned the ancient Cherokee tongue from the elders below. I learned their history, their art, their beautiful and tragic story of survival. Sometimes I see them, my former campers, now grown. Some have stayed in the surface world, living normal lives with exceptional talents and strange dreams. Some have returned to the underground, becoming pale and graceful, their eyes growing large and dark. They visit me sometimes during the new moon, and we talk about both worlds, about the beauty in darkness and in light. Last week, a new ranger was assigned to the Looking Glass Rock area. Nice young man, enthusiastic about youth programs. He came to me for advice about running camping trips. Just one thing, I told him. If kids come back with stories about pale children and deer ground cities, listen to them. Don't dismiss it as imagination. Why would they tell stories like that? He asked, laughing. Because sometimes, I said, the old stories are the truest ones of all. Last night, during the new moon, he called me. His voice was shaking. Miss Millbrook, I saw them. Children with pale skin and huge eyes watching my camp from the forest. What do I do? I smiled. Talk to them. Listen to them. And remember, they're not monsters. They're just people who live in a different kind of light. The moon-eyed people are still here, still surviving, still watching from the darkness. And I'm still keeping the agreement, still bridging two worlds that need each other more than either wants to admit. Sometimes at night, when the moon is dark and the forest is quiet, I can hear their voices in my head. Dozens of pale children singing songs in ancient Cherokee, teaching their new friends about stars that shine underground, about beauty and darkness, about homes carved in living stone. And I smile, because I know both worlds are richer for sharing their light and darkness with each other. The old agreements were made for a reason. Some traditions shouldn't be forgotten, some promises should last forever.